mean, that was such a special time, and we always talk about kind of the lightning in a bottle. We were in the right place at the right time.
The legacy of the Baltimore Stallions, the best CFL team to ever play. That's my legacy, and I'll stick to it.
I think, man, we were one of the greatest Baltimore organizations, professional organizations here in the state of Maryland. And I feel bad that we didn't get an opportunity to continue to play.
This thing comes and it just explodes in front of people, and they had crowds of 40, 45,000 people to see Canadian football. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It really was. But people here were starving for the game, and it showed up at the turnstiles, didn't it?
We helped the fact that, you know, the NFL put a team in Baltimore because they saw the success that a professional football team would have in that environment.
The greatest team in CFL history. We were, you know, we gave in 2 years. We went to the Grey Cup twice. We should have won it twice. And because of us, Baltimore's got the Ravens now. I don't think there will ever be a team as good as us.
Baltimore, Maryland, a town steeped in tradition, the birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner, and the home to some of the top professional sports teams today. Baltimore's come a long way over the past 70 years.
In 1953, Baltimore was classified as nothing but a whistle stop between New York and Washington, D.C. Nobody cared about Baltimore. They just drove through it. We were able to get an NFL franchise here. The Dallas Texans became the new Baltimore Colts. This was a franchise that nobody wanted or respected. This was a city that nobody wanted or respected. I think it was more or less a love affair at first sight. We loved the Baltimore Colts, and they loved our fans. March 28th, 1984. At the time, I was auditioning new drummers for the Baltimore Colts marching band. My wife was a flagline instructor, and she was auditioning new flags. For some reason, going home that night, we didn't turn the radio on. I don't know why. We got home, and the babysitter looked at us, and I thought, my gosh, is my sons Christopher and Patrick okay? And all the babysitter did was look at me and look over to the TV, and I saw Mayflower moving vans out in front of the Baltimore Colts complex in Owings Mills. And I said to my wife, it's over.
Once the Colts snuck out of town in those Mayflower vans on that snowy day in March of 1984, Baltimore traveled many roads in hopes of returning professional football to Charm City. Elected officials tried everything from attracting teams from upstart leagues like the USFL to attempting to lure an existing franchise to town. Then in the early 1990s, Baltimore launched an all-out effort to convince the NFL to place an expansion team in the city. The city and state pulled out all the stops, but in the end, it still wasn't enough to convince the NFL to right their wrong.
People were very enthusiastic about that because they thought, well, here's our chance to show the NFL that we belong, They didn't realize the whole thing was fixed from the very beginning, and the NFL was never coming in here, and the reason was geography. You know, you look to the north and there's Philly, and to the south and there's Washington. But they did sell those tickets out in, I think, an hour or less. I mean, it really showed a lot of want to for a meaningless game. Baltimore showed up the way they should have for that thing, but it was gamed, and they didn't realize it, and I'm still a little bit angry about that.
Once expansion was announced, I was devastated. And I felt sorry for the city of Baltimore, the state of Maryland, the Colt band. And I'm being stingy, me. I basically said, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And my wife, Charlene, told me, quit, but I'm keeping the band together, with or without you. We put too much of our money in keeping this band together. We mortgaged the house. We sold items that was treasure to us to keep this band together. So I'm keeping it going. There's something around the corner. I feel very strongly about this. There's something around the corner that's going to make a difference. We can't give up.
Baltimore's failed attempt at NFL expansion came as the Canadian Football League was attempting to spread its roots south of the border for the first time. In 1992, the CFL consisted of 8 teams. In 1993, the league added a team in Sacramento, followed the next year by teams in Las Vegas, Shreveport, Louisiana, and Baltimore.
For a variety of reasons, they were in a lot of financial trouble at that time. And I think we all know that the Baltimore and U.S. expansion was not only trying something new, but it was the chance to get expansion fees and pay off some bills. You know, I'd like to say it was because of mismanagement. And to be honest, as a longtime CFL guy, I started working in the league in '91. I look at the U.S. expansion as one of the greatest eras in CFL history, but there's a lot of forefathers that have told me not to talk about it. I don't understand why, but they were at death's door financially, and the U.S. expansion was kind of born out of necessity more than anything.
Baltimore's expansion efforts were led by 34-year-old businessman and former college football player Jim Spiros.
When I say I was in the right place at the right time, is that also I was in the right city. I was in the city. I don't know how many other places that I could have duplicated that. I don't think any, to be honest with you.
Just months after Baltimore was shunned by the NFL, Spiros announced he was bringing a CFL team to Baltimore, signed a lease to play at Old Memorial Stadium, and was bringing in a future Hall of Fame coach in Don Matthews and future Hall of Fame quarterback Tracy Ham to lay the foundation of his new team.
There was a lot of reasons for me to come to Baltimore and really just get a refresh stop. And then playing for Don Matthews, I knew Don. Don and I was on in Edmonton together with the Eskimos. He was the defensive coordinator at the time. The previous year I was in Toronto and I didn't really never settle into anything. And so coming from Toronto to Baltimore was the perfect environment and the perfect organization, and just really had the right people in line.
With the announcement of professional football truly returning to Baltimore for the first time in a decade, Spiros said there was no doubt what he was going to name his new team, the Baltimore CFL Colts.
I was in Baltimore right when the announcement was made that Jacksonville had got a team, and Charlotte had got a team, and all of a sudden Baltimore was odd man out. We got the franchise in February on my birthday, so really it was less than 4 months from the time we said we're going to move, and then from the 3 months after that, we're kicking the football off for a preseason game. So having the name Colts certainly helped people rallied around it because it was so fresh. And if it wasn't for the NFL expansion, I don't think the momentum for what I did would ever happen either.
The NFL had other ideas as it pertained to Spiros' plans for a team name. The powerful league sued Spiros, and the courts ultimately sided with the NFL, forcing the team to make drastic changes just weeks before its first season. While Spiros lost in the court of law, there was no doubt who won in the court of public opinion.
It was brilliant on their part. We kind of took that trait like, hey, it's us against the world.
The NFL sued our team so we couldn't use the name Colts. You know how much publicity that got us, Ron? I mean, you can't pay for marketing like that. You can't pay for it. I don't know how much Jim Spiros spent, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in the lawsuit, worth every single penny. Worth every penny, because we're in the, I mean, it was crazy. It was just unreal. It was surreal.
They paired me up with Joe Washington, who I'd never met before. So here is Joe and I trying to figure out a new way to play football, CFL rules. We're learning this on the fly. And then we find out the team doesn't even have a name. Jim knew that the NFL was not going to stand by and let him be the CFL Colts. He knew that. But he also knew that the team would get a lot of national attention for that, and he was absolutely right. But Joe and I called 20 games that year for a team that didn't have a name.
The support of Baltimore's team with no name was never more apparent than on July 16, 1994, when nearly 40,000 fans filled Memorial Stadium, officially bringing football back to Charm City. Among those there to offer their support were many of the Baltimore Colts greats who helped put the NFL on the map decades earlier.
It was I can't even think of the proper adjective to use, but it was magnetic, it was energetic, it was everything an athlete could dream of, and specifically for me, it was like I was like a hometown guy. So I'm not saying that I was a household name, but playing for the University of Maryland, growing up in Maryland, growing up as a Baltimore Colts fan, not a Redskins fan, but a Baltimore Colts, it was like the epitome almost of my career to play in the old Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, to actually see the guys out there, legends of the game, and just to have them out there supporting us was a big deal. It was a fun time. I just knew it was gonna continue to get better, continue to grow. They gravitated to us, and they were all in.
With a roster built with a mix of CFL veteran coaches and players and a core of young athletic newcomers, Baltimore was an instant championship contender in its first season.
You want to put the best product you can out to everybody, and there's always going to be growing pains when it starts and as you go along. But we made it fun. It was every day. It was tough at times. I mean, it was. I'm talking about for the players and. Some of the long practices and the brutal heat and trying to get where we wanted to go. But, I mean, everything was just tried to be done as good as we could do it and do it the right way. And as a U.S. team, it was probably the only team that was really set up the right way and wanted to do it the right way, which I give Don credit for that because of his years in the league, that not to try to be different, like we're going to be different. He knew what it took to have success, and we stuck to those plans, more traditional, like CFL type of team, instead of being an outlier. And we were the team that had success.
That's a tribute to Coach Matthews, man. To have a good team is to just take a lot of different personalities and get them to have one common goal. And he was able to do that for us here with the Stallions. And to have, like I said, all of the players that we had, Tracy Ham, Mike Pringle, myself, Walter Franchise Wilson. It was a great opportunity. Winning was something that we had to do. And Coach Matthews made it very clear that what we were here to do.
Nobody expected it. Honestly, as a player, you never think about, we're going to go win this, win that. We were just trying to fit in.
Adding to the perfect storm for Baltimore's love affair with its CFL team was the baseball strike, which canceled the rest of the 1994 season. With no baseball and no NFL, the CFL was literally the only professional sports game in town.
So Jim Spiros, being the businessman he was, I think he probably made the most expensive ticket, $35-$40. So that's how we got fans in the stands, and just to see the fan base of the old Baltimore Colts come out and cheer us on and support us was totally awesome. And being a hometown guy just made it, culminated my career.
They did really benefit from the fact that baseball was on strike, and the Stallions were literally the CFLers were literally the only game in town, and they were able to sell a lot of tickets because of that. Had the Orioles been playing, I don't think it would have been as successful. However, I don't think it would have been a lot less successful because this is still a football town. People try to call it a baseball town, but let's be 100% honest. This is a football town that also happens to like baseball.
The animosity from the CFL's Canadian traditionalists reached a boiling point by late November when Baltimore traveled to Vancouver, British Columbia to face the host BC Lions in the 82nd Grey Cup. More than 55,000 fans, mostly Lions faithful, packed into BC Place Stadium to witness one of the greatest games in Grey Cup history. While the fans in Baltimore loved their new CFL team, their addition to the league was not without some detractors who struggled with the U.S.'s inclusion in this purely Canadian version of football, known for 3 downs in a field wider than American fans are used to.
Well, you have to remember it was a really gloomy period in Canadian sports fan history because there were 2 NHL teams that were on their way out. The Quebec Nordique had already become the Colorado Avalanche. The Winnipeg Jets, it was known by that point, were going to become the Phoenix Coyotes. The Montreal Expos looked like they were going to be on their way out of town. And it was just a very, very gloomy period. And the CFL was always seen as the one thing with the Grey Cup that would be untouchable. That would be the one thing that the Americans couldn't take from us. They could take Gretzky, but they couldn't take our Grey Cup. And when the expansion idea first started, everybody was given assurances that the odds of any of these teams winning a championship would be fairly low. The moment that Baltimore won that game in Winnipeg, I'm talking about the 94 East Final, everybody dropped what they were doing and said, wow, this could really happen. And that's when everybody started to consider the ramifications of this 100-year-old history and the possibility we might lose it. If we lose this Grey Cup, where does it end? What happens next?
Oh my God, I tell people all the time when they ask me what memory, like what's your fondest memory, what's the best game you ever played, and that's the game. I mean, we're playing in BC Place against BC in Canada, our first year, and they did not want that Grey Cup to come across the border because they knew, and we told people, once that Grey Cup comes across the border, they ain't coming back for a while.
The heavily favored Baltimore club led 17-10 at halftime. However, BC rallied and eventually left the first-year team devastated when Lions kicker Lou Pasaglia kicked a 38-yard field goal as time expired.
What if I, missed and then you send 60,000, and of course we're talking 60,000 fans in BC Place, but how many people? There's a lot of people in our province of British Columbia that are watching the game that day, and even across Canada. So after the fact, when you think about it and you measure the enormity of the kick, I'm glad it went through.
Although disappointed with the loss, the setback only motivated Baltimore's players and coaches heading into the 1995 season. With the NFL lawsuit behind them and the team rebranded the Stallions, the players entered training camp with a sole focus: unfinished business. The Stallions entered the 1995 season in another revamped CFL, gone with a Las Vegas posse, while the Sacramento Gold Miners relocated to San Antonio and became the Texans. The CFL also added teams in Memphis, in Birmingham, with the 5 U.S. teams playing in one division and the 8 Canadian teams playing in another.
Yeah, when you have the talent that we had, and we beat some of the best teams in the CFL, and we beat teams here in the United States as well as teams abroad. So when you fall short in the Grey Cup, you come back with a hunger. We all communicated over the summer, and we all wanted to work harder and talked about just being better. So when we got back, you could tell the first day of camp, everybody was here. We were all here. We were moving, and we were in unison.
I've always dreaded going to training camp, Ron. Every single year when the time came, I'm like, oh God, I got to go to training camp in 3 weeks. Because it's like going to training camp is like freaking boot camp, right? That year, I was age 25. That year, I was looking forward to training camp. And that year, we were coming in, and we all knew what we were going to do. We knew what we were going to do.
Regardless of which division the Stallions played against, they were a team of destiny in 1995. Baltimore posted a league-best 15-3 record and were the clear-cut favorites to win the Grey Cup before an old friend showed up on Baltimore's front door, the NFL. The Cleveland Browns shocked the world when owner Art Modell announced he was moving his team to Baltimore, where they would ultimately become the Ravens.
So at that time, social media wasn't as prevalent, so we were still looking at the news to get any information, and we kind of blocked that noise. We didn't know whether it was true or not. We knew that Baltimore had been on the expansion list many times before that, and Jacksonville and all the other teams, Houston got another franchise, all these other Baltimore was being skipped over, so we were like, we've heard that noise before, so we're just going to go out and handle our business and see what happens.
Doing things in the community, we were, it was becoming home. It was becoming, we wanted to be a part of the Baltimore Stallions for, however long, our careers could keep us there. I know, people get traded and everything like that, but, we got to a point where, we got comfortable, and then we hear all these stories, and then it's like, it's upsetting, discouraging. It kind of pisses you off to a degree, but there was nothing that we could do. And to our, I don't know how to say this, but it was, I think we did a really good job as a team ignoring the noise and just listening to the voices in the locker room.
With their future beyond the season uncertain, the Stallions concentrated on the only thing in their control, bringing the Grey Cup to Baltimore. Their opponent this time, Doug Flutie and the Calgary Stampeders. There would be no last-second dramatics in this game. With wind gusts reaching more than 50 miles per hour, the Stallions silenced another mostly pro-Canadian crowd as Chris Wright scored on an 82-yard punt return just over 2 minutes into the game, and Baltimore cruised to a 37-20 victory.
It was there was a lot of anxiety in the sense that you were the anticipation of what may or may not happen, and you kind of had to be ready for anything, for the good, bad, and the ugly kind of thing. And I know that Don Matthews kept the team focused on the work ahead of them for the game. And really, as the owner, my job was just to say, listen, we're going to be here regardless. We've gone back-to-back Grey Cups. We want to win this game, and that was our focus. And I just admire the fact that the whole group, inside those four walls there, that we were able to stay very focused with, it was all over the news. Everybody was talking about it, and they had put the deal together the week where that we were in the playoffs, going to the Grey Cup, and it just kind of put a shadow over everything. But we weren't. I don't think the team was good, bad, or in between. We had to play the game, and that was the most important thing.
I ignored the noise. You know what I mean? I stayed focused, along with, I can almost say, the whole team just stayed focused. We're going to play it one game at a time. We can't control whether the NFL comes here. We didn't know whether it was going to be NFL and a CFL team in Baltimore at the time. We didn't have any. They never made mention that we were going to be moved to Montreal or anywhere else. We were just like, oh well, we'll be competing with the Colts, I guess, on TV this year, So we just stayed focused, and we stayed to the mission, and that was to win a Grey Cup.
After the dominating win, the Stallions returned home to Baltimore, where they were greeted with a small celebration at the Inner Harbor. However, with the Ravens set to arrive next season, there would be no more room for a CFL team in Baltimore.
It was difficult to accept, and I don't know if anyone ever really digested it. You just go to the next, to the next team or the next opportunity because you have to. But the closure seemed, like it didn't take place. There was definitely, something missing, and I think our families and our fans and the team and the coaches all felt that way. But it didn't take a. I don't think it made us appreciate the opportunity or what we achieved any less. In a way, it might have really stayed with us more because we realize how fleeting such success and opportunities are. Right here we are, Grey Cup champs, and we can't even come back to our city. It was sad, and also for the fans. I mean, our fans at Baltimore, you remember, they were really great, so supportive, and I'm happy that they ended up getting a team, an NFL team that they can root for, but and a great team at that they've been, but they were so supportive. It was a sad situation.
Spiros would move the Stallions to Montreal, where they would be rechristened the Alouettes. The other U.S. expansion teams would fold, and the CFL's American experiment was over.
It was a bit of a shell shock, right? We come back and do our parade downtown Baltimore at the Inner Harbor, and do all that in November, and then pretty quickly afterwards, you start hearing rumors that there's going to be an NFL team coming to town. So certainly kind of wrapping my brain around all that was a bit of a challenge for a couple of months. I think it put my mind at ease once I heard we're moving to Montreal, and that I'd still be part of that move, so that helped. I think personally, selfishly, I was able to get into a few games that 95 season as a rookie. So, of course, I was really hoping to come back one more year and start getting some playing time in front of my home crowd. But I also, tried to be a professional, try to show my own maturity and understand, hey, this is a business. And if I'm moving to Montreal and I get an opportunity, I'm going. And we just move forward.
The biggest regret for the Stallions players, coaches, and fans was that the team never truly had the chance to celebrate their accomplishments on the field. That changed in 2015 when Spiros gathered them together at Towson University for a reunion 2 decades after that historic run.
It was great. We, not only just seeing my old teammates, but seeing coaches. We got coaches that are still coaching today off that team. And we caught up, we had a great time, anytime alcohol's involved. It was just like a normal day for us, getting back in the locker room. While we're sitting in that banquet, it was like being in the locker room with all of us sitting together and having a good time and talking about our families now. And, we're much older now. And, of course, we get to lying on each other and making up stories on each other. And that's what teammates do, and that's what, and I say teammates, but I mean family. I mean, that team was a family because we had to merge together. We had to bond together in order to be as successful as we were.
The reunion was phenomenal. I got a chance to meet with some of my teammates, with my brothers. And really the reunion is one of the reasons why I've maintained contact with a lot of my former teammates. It meant a lot. It was great seeing all the guys, Jim Pop, Mr. Spiros, all the players, seeing OJ Brigance, seeing everybody. It meant a lot. I can't believe it was 10 years ago. So it was fantastic. I wish we would do one every 10 years, every 5 years. So I'll do one every year. I'll fly out there. I'll fly across the country for that. So it meant a lot because the camaraderie that you have with the teammates and the guys that you played for. Look, the reason why I played with 2 broken ankles, 2 stress fractures in my ankles is because of those guys. Like, this is the things that you do for your teammates.
While the Stallions only existed for 2 seasons, its impact on those who were a part of the team and those who supported them runs much deeper than that. To many, the Stallions provided Baltimore a bridge between the Colts and Ravens and reminded the NFL and the rest of the country Baltimore can and will support professional football.
30 years later, what we did would never be able to happen today. I honestly believe that. So I think the legacy is that what we did for Baltimore, Baltimore needed this. Baltimore at that time, it was critical that we brought football back when we did. I think we were a springboard to keep the momentum going, the Sunshine Fund to keep that $70 million there in the state legislation so they could get the stadium. I think us playing football in Baltimore in that time period was really extremely important on why the NFL came back to Baltimore. We showed it. I mean, 37,000 people showing up for a game. So I think our legacy is always going to be we were a big springboard in helping football come back to Baltimore.
Every year at Grey Cup, I still, and I'll always find them out, or they'll come find me, and I still have my brown pin or whatever that we may not repeat, but we will not forget. I love that slogan, and I love that with the Stallions logo, and the fans are, they're walking around Grey Cup wearing their Stallions gear, and a couple times a year at our games here in Montreal, we get fans that pop up and come see us. And I think that's so special, and it's just indicative of 30 years later. And and some of them come up with their kids, and their kids never saw a game, but they heard about it and they know about it. And that's what I think makes it that much more special. It's the story has become, we've maintained that story, and if anything, it keeps getting bigger over the years because of how special that connection was.
I'm not sure they have a legacy. I'm really not. I'm really afraid that little period in between the Colts and the Ravens is going to be forgotten, and that people aren't going to talk about them very much anymore. But I went to those games and saw 40,000 people in that stadium. I saw those turnstiles spinning like roulette wheels. I saw the success they were able to have here, and I have a championship ring out of that deal. That's my personal legacy. I just hope that some shred of those 2 years remains 50 years from now. I hope they're still talking about this, but honestly, I doubt they will, and I think that's very sad.
It was a great learning tool for the people of Baltimore, for the fans. We were without professional football for years. Canadian football brought us back, even though there's different rules. They brought us back in knowing when to cheer, when not to cheer, and gave us hope and showed us they were a great city for professional football. So this is basically the situation which brought professional football back to Baltimore, and we thank the Stallions.